About this time last year, we were at a Are You OK board meeting, and our general manager, Brendan, said, I think we should do a fundraiser to raise money for Are You OK by doing the Kokoda Trail. And I would like, the board members to think about going. And so I considered it a little while and then thought, why not? To be honest, I didn't know that much about Kokoda. I didn't know much about that campaign, but I decided to go. And so I circulated around a few friends and a couple were able to go. But what was really fantastic was that that's me on the far left, and right beside is my son Adam, 20 years old. So we first of all went to Port Moresby, got in this tiny plane, flew over the Owen Stanley Ranges, and as we looked down, you could see the steepness down there, just unbelievable, like this and this. It took us 25 minutes to fly to Popondetta, and it was going to take us 9 days to retrace our steps. Anyway, we got to Kokoda, the village of Kokoda, and this is where the Japanese advance was happening. The Japanese were unbelievably better equipped than the Australians. These were battle-hardened Marines that were advancing. There were at times 6 times as many, 10 times as many as the Australians. The Australians were militia, which basically means they were Dad's army, except they weren't Dad's army, they were Son's army. They were, young men, farmers, storekeepers who'd had 6 weeks training. So we got there. We got to Kokoda and we started the walk and we learnt more about it. The first day was quite short. It was about 2 hours. We got to this place called Hoi. And Hoi was just spectacular. It was like a landscape gardener had been given a $100 million budget to create the perfect campsite. And after that easy walk, we got to about 4 o'clock. I thought, well, maybe this Kokoda thing isn't too bad. Maybe it's a bit easier than everyone says. But the next day, everything changed. Like, within a very, very short period of time, we were climbing mountains like this, drenched like we'd just gone for a swim. And you can see the steepness here. It was like that, and it was like that for 9 days. But it wasn't just the steepness. It was the mud, which you can't see there. It was the tree roots. You had to watch every single step. We got to a place called Isavara. And Isavara is where a very, very significant battle took place. This is where Paul Keating landed by helicopter and kissed the ground and said, this is holy ground. On this site was a very important battle where the Australians held back the Japanese. And there was one young private, Bruce Kingsbury, whose battalion was nearly wiped out. He was taken back to hospital, but then he heard that the headquarters was under attack. If the headquarters fell, it would have been all over. So he straight away volunteered, went back, and through an extraordinary episode of bravery, got a brain gun and just really ran through the Japanese and completely changed the momentum. They really think that if he hadn't done that they may have taken the battalion headquarters and basically it would have been all over. He was then tragically killed, awarded the VC afterwards. But you can see in the bed there's 4 granite pillars there which have carved into them the values that these diggers really took on. Sacrifice, courage, mateship, endurance. And it had a very deep effect on us. It was like entering the twilight zone in these places. We had no phone, no internet, no hot water, no gas, no electricity for 9 days. But we somehow, as a group, you've got nothing to do at night. You get there at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no TV to watch. There's nothing to do. And we just started to have these unbelievable conversations. This is our leader, Tom. despite looking 15 years old, he had an amazing story. He was a Chinese national who first came to Australia when he was 15 years old, couldn't speak English. And he's become so inspired by this story that he leads people now. And he cared deeply about our experience and our well-being. He created an amazing environment and private conversations, meaningful conversations like we don't have in this busy world we had. And we sort of took on a tribal thing, a thriving tribe thing. And as I walked, I just couldn't help but reflect on the achievements of these diggers. It was the toughest thing I'd ever done. I was, right to the end of my tether. But these diggers, they had malaria, they had dysentery, they were carrying 40-kilo packs, they were outnumbered 6-1, and yet somehow they prevailed. And as I walked along this trail, this African proverb kept coming to mind. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I reflected on the experience of Are You OK? How in March 2009, I met Gavin Larkin. Gavin had lost his father to suicide and decided to create this. And for those of you who don't know, Gavin tragically died from cancer in 2011. But I just thought how proud he would have been to know how far we'd got, that now 66% of Australians are aware of Are You OK? And 1 in 5 Australians actually ask someone. 1 in 5 actually ask someone. And I also reflected on my own life. How just 10 years before, things were so bleak, I had so little hope, that I actually, on July 24, 2004, wrote my family a suicide note and attempted to take my life. And here it was, 10 years later, and through the help, the support, the encouragement of so many people, I've got books out, I do this, and I've got hundreds of emails and letters just saying that my work makes a difference. But most of all, I reflected on the unbelievable achievement of these diggers. And that was brought into stark highlight at the Bamana Cemetery, where you see thousands of headstones. And it just has their name, a brief description, their date of birth, a brief description from their family, and their age. And their age was 17, 19, 23, 28, 21. And having my son there, Adam, 20 years old, I couldn't help but reflect on, all those mothers, all those fathers that knew or heard the news, the unimaginable news, that their boy wasn't coming home. I can't begin to describe the euphoria when we came out of there. You can sense it in the faces up there. We'd become a thriving tribe. But as I reflected on the diggers, as I reflected on Are You OK, as I reflected on my own experience of getting support from lots of people, I just couldn't help but think that tribes trump self. If we want to go far, tribes trump self. If we want to outperform, outlast, outmaneuver, tribes trump self. If we want to achieve the extraordinary, tribes trump self. So what about you? Have you been in a situation where you've been in an amazing team, an amazing tribe, whether it's at work, whether it's sport, whether it's socially, whether it's at school? Have you been in a situation where a tribe just clicked? People work well together and they produce more than the sum of the parts. I want you just to think about, if you have been, to think about a word you would use to describe that. A word you would use to describe that. But here's the paradox. You can't create a thriving tribe if we're not thriving ourselves. And as you might have gathered, I'd had some times when I wasn't thriving. Back in 2000, I was the joint managing director of an executive search firm which specialised in the internet, making money out of the internet. It was a boom market, but it was like, we had talks this morning from Gehan and others about the rate of change, but it's incredible, isn't it, to realise that 15 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg was just getting his first pubic hair. So for someone who got his first pubic hair 15 years ago, he now runs an organisation that if it was a country, would be the largest country in the world. Extraordinary and profound change. But all that changed. We had a boom market, the phone was ringing, everyone wanted to hire these people with experts on making money out of the internet. But then the tech crash happened. And in a very, very short period of time, companies collapsed all over the place. And I was in recruitment, going out, asking people about the next 6 months recruitment plans. Recruitment, we're lucky to be here ourselves in that period of time. So basically, it started a real crisis for me. I've had episodes of depression before. I felt huge responsibility for my team, my tribe, and I just tried to work harder. I just tried to do more. Thought if I did it more, that it would change. But a very short period of time, I lost my job, I lost my marriage, became estranged from my kids, and had to go and live with my parents. And I couldn't help but think of George Costanza. There's an episode in Seinfeld where George says to Jerry, your life's not on track. When you're our age, you have to go back to live with your parents. Like, I really love George, but I didn't want to be George. The long story short, I did slowly start to come back from the brink. I went through, my psychiatrist described as the worst depression he'd ever treated. 5 years, 23 different medications, more than 20 lots of ECT. But I did start to come out of it. And it was a combination of really starting to exercise again, good medical care, reaching out to family and friends who I'd become isolated with. And I did gradually start to get to maybe a 4 out of 10, a 4 out of 10. And then I tried meditation. And because I'd done meditation before, I found that I was able to do it. And that really has become a core part of my daily rituals now. I had tried it when I was really depressed, but I couldn't because I just couldn't concentrate. And then I had an idea to write my first book because you can read the facts and figures, but I yearned for stories, real stories of people who'd come back from the brink. And so for my first Australian edition, I interviewed people like Jeff Gallup, like John Conrad's, Petria Thomas, gold medal swimmers, Margaret Olley from the art world. And it was launched by John Brogden at the Black Dog Institute. And I think because there were a lot of well-known people involved, they did a lot of media. I did about 200 media interviews over a 6-week period. And the thing that blew me away in both book signings and talkback radio was that most of the people that contacted me were actually the loved ones. Actually the loved ones. And that was an epiphany to me as well, because I didn't realise how much my illness, the effect it had on other people. So that led me to write my second book, which is Back from the Brink 2. Now, all the time I was seeing my psychiatrist, and he would always ask me to rate my mood. 0 to 10. 10 you're dying, 0 you're dying, 10 you're thriving. And after a while I asked, why do you ask me that? And he said, well, it helps me understand from your perspective where you are, but I also believe that one day you should be able to master your mood. He said, master your mood? I said, haven't I got a clinical illness? And he said, you'll always have a predisposition, but I believe that you should be able to learn how to do it, how to master your mood. So then I decided to do my last book, which came out last year in Australia, the UK and the US. And I did a lot of stories as well, including Patrick Kennedy, part of the Kennedy clan, Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's chief advisor. But I also decided to ask over 4,000 people, of everything you tried, what worked best for you? And I want to cover this today about what's important, not just about coming out of the red zone or being really depressed, but how we avoid it in the first place. So this is the concept of a moodometer. And I'd like to convince you that this is one of the most exciting things that you've ever seen. I don't see the eyes lighting up, but let me try and explain. Look at the words associated with the green zone. Optimistic, resourceful, energetic. Look at those associated with the orange zone. Worried, defensive, irritated. Now, as leaders, your role is unbelievably important. Each of you would be responsible for the care of thousands of people in your hospitals. Are you better off to be in the green zone or the red zone? There's been a lot of quantitative evidence now that looks at the value in keeping people in the green zone. So much so that, I'm even addressing conferences with chief financial officers that get this. That people in the green zone, and this comes from Harvard Business Review, are 31% more productive, they sell 37% more, they're 300% more creative, and 10% higher customer rating. This isn't the soft stuff, this is the hard stuff about creating successful organisations when things are rapidly changing. And all this morning, Gihan's talk, other talks have been about change and rapid change. But if you don't have fuel in the tank to implement that change, it's all for naught. Let's look at the red zone. 40% of Australians say they're typically stressed out every day, 40%. But stress per se isn't a bad thing. It's a bell curve. We go up the bell curve, stress improves performance, and then it starts to decline, and declines quickly. What's really significant is that 12% of Australians, of your employees, rate their level of stress as 8, 9 or 10 on a 10-point scale every day. And the cost of this is enormous. A study by Medibank Private said it accounted for 34% of lost productivity. Healthcare is one of the most hardest hit areas. This is figures from Safe Work Australia. So mental health claims account for 33% of payouts of all workers' compensation. Now, the biggest contributor of all industries is your industry. 21% of all claims come from healthcare and community services. Now, in preparing for this, I rang a few CEOs just to get their perspective. And most of them hadn't heard that healthcare was the biggest contributor to mental health care claims. But they said, we're in the caring profession. We have nurses that really care passionately. They burn themselves out and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that's true. But it's not just the frontline staff, is it? It's not just the frontline staff. I'd like you just to raise your hands. Wesley Mission did a survey that showed that 85% of Australians know someone close to them that's been through depression or a stress disorder, 85% of Australians. So just raise your hands if you know someone in your life, whether it's work or home, someone close to you who's been touched by stress or depression. Just raise your hands. Keep it up and just have a look around the room. And so it will be the same in your hospitals. The same with every member of staff. Last year, there was a tragedy of Gerard Kennedy, and I know some of you know Gerard Kennedy. Now, I happened to be delivering a leadership development program at Ramsay 2 days after he took his life. I never knew him, but I felt the palpable sadness in that organisation. So this isn't just about our frontline staff, it's about us as leaders, about what we can do to keep ourselves in the green zone. It was particularly poignant for me because there for the grace of God went I. But I'm here to say that for people that might be here in the red zone, and there will be some here, you can come back from the brink. This is the biggest worry. Safe Work Australia estimates that 70% of mental health claims or mental health issues don't go to claim because people are so concerned about the stigma that they're not claiming. Now, if you want to get all the facts and figures beside this, I produced this report, The Elephant in the Boardroom, and I've never had a problem like this. This is sensational. This is just great. But it is. Here's the thing. It's the biggest cause of lost productivity, and yet 86% of people going through it would rather suffer in silence and discuss it with their workmates. 86%. So the biggest cause of lost productivity, and no one's talking about it. So what determines mood? If we want to be in the green zone, what determines mood? Sonia Lyubomirsky did a book called The How of Happiness, where she reviewed what she called positive affect. That's what psychologists call it, i.e. mood. And she found out that it really came down to three things. It came down to genetics, came down to events that happen in our lives or circumstances, and it came down to actions, what we choose to do each day. So that's the three: genetics, actions, and events. So just put your hand up if you think the biggest contributor would be genetics. Put your hand up. No takers? Who thinks the biggest one would be events that happen in our lives? Who think the biggest contributor would be what we choose to do each day? Great, it's certainly made for the second two. The biggest contributor is genetics. Some people are just born more robust, more resilient, higher levels of well-being than others. But the next biggest one, which gives us an eternal hope for our organisations, our home tribe, our work tribe, is it's about what we choose to do each day. And that's what I want to focus on today. What we choose to do each day that can either make us or break us. Now, if you'd asked me today, what would 10 be for me now? It would be singing live on stage with Bruce Springsteen. Born to Run, my hero, blue jeans, white shirt. And it's not just because he's a legendary rock and roller. It's because he is a thriving tribe leader. He creates unbelievable value for himself, for his home tribe, and his work tribe. And a zero for me will be sitting through 3 episodes back to back of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Seriously, you'd rather poke needles in your eyes, would you? So as leaders, we have 3 priorities. Priority 1 is to keep ourselves in the green zone. Priority 2 is to keep our tribe in the green zone. And priority 3 is to have the will and the skill to help those in the red zone. Learning to master our mood is essential because if we master our mood, we master our life. And you can only imagine after going through 5 years of being in the red zone, everything I talk about is robust. Not just tried by me, but thousands of others and shown to work. So my challenge to you today is to choose one thing that I talk about to apply for yourself, to keep yourself in the green zone. And one thing to keep your tribe in the green zone. So that might be create the circumstances where they're in the green zone or knowing how to help those that are in the red zone. Now, if I was to survey all your employees in your hospitals and ask them, what percentage do you agree that your leader models sustainable work practices? So if I was to survey them all, now we don't know unless we actually ask them this, but this is based on a survey of 19,000 people by Harvard Business Review last year. So who believes within your hospital, all the employees would say that 75 to 100% of employees would say, my leader models sustainable work practices? Who believes that 50 to 75% would? One at the back. Who believes that 25 to 50% would? Who believes that 0 to 25 would? Okay. So here's the findings. 25% agree that their leader models sustainable work practices. 1 in 4. So when you consider those 1 in 4 that actually believe that their leader models sustainable work practices, do you think for those employees it would be better or worse for the organisation? Do you think they think, oh, the guy's not working hard or the lady's not working hard, I'm going to go home early? Or do you think it would be better or worse? So just put your thumbs up if you think it'd be better. Put your thumbs down if you think it'd be worse. No signs? Thumbs up, thumbs down. For those 1 in 4 that believe it, they are 55% more engaged, 72% higher well-being, greater levels of trust. So that's why we have to keep ourselves in the green zone. That's why our first priority must be to keep ourselves in the green zone. How do we do that? Well, I believe it comes down to our why code. Understanding what is unique about us. Because I believe that true resilience comes by being true to ourselves, knowing our energy, knowing our strengths, knowing our values, and being true to that. It's made up of 3 things. Understanding our purpose, our direction. Understanding what energises me. Understanding what my positive strengths are. What are my top 5 strengths out of a possible 34? So purpose. Being able to have an individual purpose. I do a lot of work in workshops, helping people to actually define that. And it usually comes down to 3 questions. What do you do? Who do you serve? And how do those that you serve benefit by what you do? So let me give you an example. I did some work with some financial planners. And you're probably aware there's been a lot of stories about rogue financial planners. You know, things that have done the wrong thing. And I worked with a group who were just so far from that it wasn't funny. They were so conscientious, were so motivated to do the right thing. And I took this through the process of reflecting on what was important to them, why they did this work that they did. And after a while, a young guy came up and said, you know, I was embarrassed to say I was a financial planner at parties. There's just been so much bad news. But what I realised that I do is that I help people be worry-free about money so they can live their ideal life. Now that was his words, and it energised him to say that. So what is your purpose? Is it to, you know, help patients leave well? Is it to create an amazing workplace? Is it a combination of that? When I decided that my purpose was to show leaders how to build their resilience, their mood and their performance by being their true self, everything changed. It changes what conferences you go to, it changes what you read, it changes who you interact with. So I'd strongly encourage you to write your own draft, your first draft of what your purpose is. And when times get tough, when there's massive change on, to be able to reflect on your leadership purpose is paramount. The second part is really around energizers. What energizes us? We are the CEO of our life. I know lots of you are CEOs of hospitals, but we're also the CEO of our life, the Chief Energy Officer. We can either do things that enhance our energy or destroy our energy. And knowing what those things are is absolutely essential. I'm not talking about general things, but knowing from your perspective what it is that energizes you. I say that there's three types of energy. There's the physical energy, which I call vitality. And that's from exercise, it's from resting well, it's from eating well. If we have a 30-minute walk, a brisk walk, Mayo Clinic says our mood is better 2 hours later, 4 hours later, 6 hours later, up to 12 hours later. Just a 30-minute walk. We can all fit 30 minutes in there somewhere, either before or during. The next part is resting well. You know, we think that we can work 12 hours straight and be productive and be able to cope with things. But all the research shows that that's just rubbish. We have to be able to replenish, we have to be able to renew. Jim Lure trained elite tennis players, and he discovered something quite amazing. That the top ones, the very top ones, were able to go through rituals to renew between when they finished the point to when they went back to the back line, to when they went through their ritual, to when they served. The elite players could reduce their heart rate by 10% in that time. So how do you regenerate between points? How do you regenerate from going through a stressful situation with a staff member to another meeting? I want to show you something now which is a very quick way to do that. So if everyone just stand up for a minute. And I want you to stand about half a centimetre taller than what you normally do. And what we're going to do is to breathe in deeply for 4 seconds through our nose, hold it for 7, and breathe out for 8. So you can shut your eyes if you want to do this if you want to. So let's breathe in for 4 deeply, hold for 7, out for 8. Now we're going to do it 3 more times. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Do it in your own time. And when you're ready, just open your eyes. How does that feel? It took 1 minute. And I've counted this. My heart rate drops by 10% in 1 minute when I do that. So I encourage you to try to do that yourselves. Regenerate between the points. Recharge between the points. Take a seat. The next part is intimacy or relationships. You know, we are social beings. Gallup research has shown that those with the highest well-being to stress ratio spend 6 hours per day with people they like. So if you don't like the people you work with, you're stuffed. And they define like as people who care about me as a person and people who listen to me. Again, it just shows the importance of having those people in our lives, choosing to have people that enhance our well-being rather than destroy it, making time, whether it's for private people or work people, that you have people in your week that are good for you. And finally, prosperity or external. What we give externally. So this is what we get from work, what we get from the community. So is anyone here involved with, a charity or schools or sports or anything like that? Those that do are more engaged at work, they live longer, they're healthier. When I reflect over my career, the most rewarding thing, probably the hardest, but probably the most rewarding thing was helping to start Are You OK? We had no resources, we had no employees, and it was unbelievably challenging, but it just energised us doing it because we had a purpose. A conversation could change a life. Positive strengths. Knowing what our top 5 strengths are out of a possible 34. My son, who you saw in the Kokoda story about 4 years ago, said, Adam, mate, what do you think you're going to do? School's coming up, only got 18 months left, what are you going to do? He thought for a while and he said, oh, Dad, I think I'm going to go into advertising. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that? He said, oh, I really like Mad Men. And being an ex-recruiter, I think I'm quite good at asking questions, so I sought to find out what he really saw. And it turns out that what he really liked about advertising through the eyes of Mad Men was that everyone has a bar fridge, that there's lots of long lunches, and you sleep with lots of beautiful women. Thought, interesting hypothesis, mate. Why don't we test it out? So Gavin Larkin, who was the founder of Are You OK, he was the chief executive of an advertising company. So I said, can Adam come and do some from work experience? And so sure enough, he did. Went in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Picked him up on Friday, got in my car and said, I don't think I'm going to do advertising, Dad. And I said, well, no, not quite what you thought. And he said, no, it wasn't quite what I thought. So anyway, I got him to do his Gallup Strengths Finder. And that, as I said, helps you identify your top 5 strengths out of a possible 34. And 2 of his strengths, one was futuristic, one was restorative, which means problem solving. And so he is really interested in the future. I'll introduce him to Gihan later. And he loves to solve problems. He does crossword puzzles, Sudoku, he just loves it. Stuff I hate. So his favourite subjects were maths and science. So I took him to the university. Has anyone been to University Open Day these days? Have they changed or what? They're like a seduction now because they see the students as cash flow. And so they set up this thing where there was, for 18-year-old boys, Adam and 3 of his friends along, free food and free alcohol. For 18-year-old boys, big thumbs up. Lots of great stories about racing across the desert, looking at dinosaur bones. But the real coup was having lots of really good-looking girls from second year tell them about how great science was. So all 4 of them signed up. But here's the thing. We had done his strengths test first, and he loved his first year. He loved it because it played to his strengths, problem solving, thinking about the future. At the end of the first year, he and his girlfriend travelled overseas for 12 months, came back and I thought, like all dads, he's going to go back. First thing he said, I can't wait to go back to uni. Does that mean he's going to be a scientist all his life? No, it doesn't. But if he plays to his strengths, he'll love his work and he'll do good at it. And here's the proof. Gallup research shows that people that use their top 5 strengths every day are 600% more likely to be engaged in their work and 300% more likely to report high job satisfaction. If you want to find out what your top 5 are, you just Google Gallup Strengths Centre. Centre spelt in the American way, C-E-N-T-E-R. You'll find it costs about $15 Australian to do it. Now, for leaders, if we want our job to be better, we need to develop the people that we have working with us and for us. If we ignore someone, there's a 40% chance they'll be disengaged. If we focus on their weaknesses, there's a 22% chance they'll be disengaged. But if we focus on their strengths, only a 1% chance they'll be disengaged. Knowing our strengths is paramount. So as leaders, we need to know our purpose, our direction, our personal direction, what energises us, to make sure we make time for those activities in our week, and we need to use our top 5 strengths to achieve our goals, but also to overcome adversity. Does anyone know where this comes from? City Slickers. Who's seen City Slickers? For those of you that haven't, it's about 4 burnt-out middle-aged men, about 40 years old, lost their mojo, hate life, so they decide to go on a cattle drove to get their mojo back. They go out to Montana, and they got this cattle drove, and on the cattle drove is this crusty character called Curly. And Curly is the master of his domain. Whatever goes wrong, Curly sorts it out. Just handles a crisis like it's nothing, just sorts it out. And at one stage, one of the city slickers, who's played by Billy Crystal, says, Curly, your life makes sense. You bring the cattle home, you handle anything that happens, you're at peace with yourself. Life makes sense. So, I suck. I hate me, my wife hates me, my boss hates me. What's your secret? And Curly does this. He says, and Billy Crystal goes, what, your finger? He says, no, just one thing. What is that one thing? And Curly says, that's what you have to find out. But if you find out and you look after that, everything takes care of itself. Now, believe it or not, about 4 years ago, I was asked to go on a cattle drove in outback Queensland by clients from Medibank Private, George Savides and his executive team. And it was to raise money for mental health services in outback Queensland. And my job was to do some talks along the way, do some radio interviews, and also do some facilitation and discussion. And I'd always loved this movie before I went, so I watched it again, and this was the one scene that really captured me. And so as I was riding out there, and again, it was 4 or 5 days, no phone, no internet, I was really just thinking, what is my one thing? What is my one thing? I like work, family's important, exercise is really important, meditation is important. And then I think, well, if I had to choose one thing, I get up at 5 o'clock every morning and I meditate for 20 minutes. And then I go for a walk, and then I write down my day and plan my day. Well, my mind's fresh, my body's fresh. So if I had to choose one thing, it would be my meditation, because that starts it for me. So I said to this team, I said, what is it for you? What is your one thing? And someone said, when my relationship is right with my wife, everything takes care of itself. Someone else said, when I go on my 2-hour bike ride 3 days a week, that's it for me. Someone else said, when I have quality time with my 4-year-old daughter, that's it for me. So what is it for you? What is it if you do that? Everything takes care of itself. Now, I've done this in hundreds of seminars and conferences. It never ceases to amaze me what people say is their one thing. I've had a woman say, when I go beach fishing 3 times a week. I've had a Burley coal miner say, when I sing in the choir. So what is it for you? So it's not enough just to know what your one thing is, but to live your one thing, to make it a ritual, to be part of it and to enjoy that. I'll talk now about helping people in the red zone, people that are struggling. And as we saw before, what percent of people are really highly distressed at work? Who remembers? 12%. 12%. It accounts for 34% of lost productivity, but most of it's hidden. You see absenteeism, but you don't see presenteeism. And presenteeism is estimated to be 6 times larger. People at work, but not fully productive. Some of the things I'm going to talk about will sound quite simple and quite simplistic, but I did a session like this for Metro Rail, who run all the trains around Melbourne in November last year, and it was for the leadership team, the CEO and the top 100 people. And I got this letter. I've been a lifelong sufferer of depression. I've been in my shell. Your talk has given me the tools and motivation to hit my issues head on. In the last few weeks, I have dropped 5 kilos, twice the energy level I did, taken up meditation, which I love. But this is what I love. My 2 daughters and my wife, they love having me around. This sounds simple, but if it's done well, it can be profound. It can have a profound effect on you and your home tribe, but also your work tribe. It's just as relevant for your home tribe as your work tribe. So as I mentioned at the start, I actually asked 4,000 people, of everything you tried, what worked the best? Everything you tried, what worked the best? I wasn't looking for exact one single solution. I was looking for themes. I gave people 60 options and they had to rate the effectiveness. So what do you think is the most important part of recovery for someone? Just have a quick chat on your table for a minute or two about what you think out of those 60 options would be the most important thing for recovery. Just take a minute or two. So, who's got a guess? Guess here? You've just been nominated? Sorry? Admitting it? Yeah, well, that's a huge thing. Huge thing. Absolutely. Any other ideas? Up the back? Connection. Compassion or emotional support. Feeling that someone is there to care about them person, whether that be a loved one, a work colleague, a support group, but even mental health professionals. I actually differentiated between the treatment they got for mental health professionals and the emotional support. Emotional support was rated much higher. Second thing was accessing expert. Now, I know we've got a number of psychiatric hospitals that are represented here today, and you would know that not every GP is created the same in mental health treatment. Professor Gordon Parker has told me that in 6 years of training to become a general practitioner, medical students receive how much in knowledge, formal lectures about depression and anxiety? How much do you think? Lots of, not much? 6 hours. And yet it now accounts for 26% of GP visits. So knowing how to find a mental health savvy GP is one of the critical things required. Revitalising work. Out of 60 options, fulfilling work came in number 6 out of 60. So it was rated ahead of cognitive behaviour therapy, which is often thought as the gold standard of treatment of depression. Work is incredibly important to our wellbeing. I learnt this when part of my recovery was placing people into volunteer roles. These people had breakdowns and placing them into volunteer roles. And exercise, we've already talked about the importance of exercise. But I want to focus on one thing, and that is compassion and emotional support. Because I've told my story so publicly, people feel comfortable telling me their story. And it boggles your mind what you hear. Everyone is fighting a hard battle. So being able to be compassionate is incredibly important. When we did research before we started the Are You OK at Work program, we decided to ask or to find out why people don't ask, are you okay at work? And why do you think they don't? One thing is they don't know how to start the conversation. The second reason is that they're really scared the person might say they're not okay and not know what to do. And so all these resources have been put in place with that in mind. This is the way that you do it. You break the ice, you talk about the weather, talk about family, and then make an observation about a change in behaviour. Someone might be not as, coming to Friday night drinks or not getting their reports on time. We've noticed that. Is everything okay? Are you okay? The next thing, and men are really bad at this, listen without judgment. The first thing offered will very rarely be the full story. And so just seek to understand. Someone might be turning up to work late, but the reason they might be turning up to work late is because they're not sleeping. The reason they're not sleeping is because their son has become an ice addict. You can't help until you have a good understanding. We're not asking people to be counsellors, but just to help the other person be understood, because the more they feel understood, the greater our capacity to influence them. The second thing is to encourage action. Encourage them to see their GP, often to make the phone call for them. If they're reluctant to do that, call a helpline. Reluctant to do that, go to the Black Dog Institute and do a self-test. But get them to take one little step. And finally, follow up. Because when people are in the red zone, and I can speak from first-hand experience, they give up hope. And so following up to see them taking that one little step can be a huge, huge difference. Now, if people want to know more about this, or if you are counselling someone who would like assistance, that website, iambackfromthebrink.com, I've put together a 30-day mood boost challenge where I share simple tips about how you find a mental health savvy GP, how you exercise when you don't feel like it, how you tell someone that you're struggling. 73% of people that have taken action on this report that their mood has improved over that 30-day period. I've also put together a series of short 1-minute videos which convey the same thing. They're suitable for playing on on a smartphone. So there's ones that are about how to find a mental health savvy GP, how to exercise when you don't feel like it. This statement is gold on your balance sheet. It's as good as having gold on your balance sheet. The Gallup organisation is researching engagement since the 1970s. They've evaluated thousands of questions. They've now got it down to the Q12, 12 questions which best predict whether someone's engaged or not engaged. If you have engaged people, you have a successful business, you have a profitable business. This one statement, out of all the thousands evaluated, is the best predictor of engagement. It's the best predictor of profitability, it's the best predictor of productivity, it's the best predictor of customer service, it's the best predictor of how long someone will stay in the organisation. The final part is keeping people in the green zone. And caring is what it's really all about. Having some tangible skills, but also putting them into action. I've been incredibly fortunate that my tribe has Alan and Judy Cowan that are the leaders. They cared for me when I couldn't care for myself, as they have done for their 5 kids, their 11 grandkids and their extended family. But they just care, and that can make the most profound difference, whether you're trying to help someone in your home tribe or your work tribe. Now, I always suspected that tribes in the workplace between 20 and 150 people have moods just like the individual. And sure enough, it is. That tribes have 5 moods. I've collaborated with Dave Logan, who wrote this best-selling book, based on doing a survey of 19,000 people in organisations around the world. And what they showed was that there are 5 levels of tribes. Life sucks. So this is like the Health Services Union. It's 2%. It's so dysfunctional. It blows your mind. The next thing that can happen, that can come out of there, it's almost like you have to give up on it now. I don't know. There could be progress. You know better than me now, but it's not great. Next one is a big one. So life sucks is only 2% of tribes. My life sucks is 24% of tribes. This is where people feel like victims. This is like a scene out of The Office. This is like, where people just blame everyone else. They aren't in control. The next one is I'm great. Now, in theory, that's good. People are motivated, they're able. But when you say I'm great, what do you imply by that? And you're not. So that's why when you have a culture like that, people often hide information to make themselves look better. They don't collaborate well across departments. The great stuff happens in we're great, life's great. We're great is where people understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Now, I asked before about, when I was talking about the Kokoda story, about reflect on when you were in a really great tribe where extraordinary things happened. It could have been work, could have been sport, could have been school days, it could have been anything. What word do you think about when you think about that tribe? Does anyone want to mention something? Just call something out? One where it just rocked. Powerful? Fantastic. A tribe is just like a person. Powerful is about energy. It's become unstoppable. Tribes having complementary strengths. There are 4 domains of strengths. Each of those 34 fit into 4 categories. of leadership teams, executing strategic influence relationship building. You need all four to deliver a great tribe. Having a sense of purpose. You know, when I think of Are You OK? We had no money, we had no resources, but we had the purpose that conversation could change a life. Great tribes have all those things. At the start, I challenged you to think about one thing you could do to keep yourself in the green zone and one thing to help keep your tribe in the green zone. I hope you decide to make that a ritual and a habit. How can you, as an organisation, work together? Well, imagine if you knew all your direct reports one thing and you made or encouraged people to live their one thing, the whole executive team. Boston Consulting Group, the number 2 employer on Fortune Best Employers, have created something called predictable time off, which allows all their leadership team and all their employees to have predictable time off to do their one thing. Imagine if you could do that for your team. What else? You can share your undies. Create an Are You OK culture. Are You OK culture cares about our own well-being and then looks out for others and asks them, are you OK? Now, I know many organisations here have done great work with Are You OK? But I'd like to challenge you. If you wanted to do something for your tribe, the leaders who are often lonely in small places that they have no one to speak to, what about if you created your own peer support environment where you could talk to each other if you're having a tough time? Now, if anyone is interested in doing that, please let APH know, because I would gladly volunteer my time to help you create that. Thank you for your time this morning or this afternoon. And I really wish that you go for the green zone for yourself and you go for the green zone for your tribe. Thank you.